Stuxnet remains one of the most interesting pieces of malware ever created. In the digital world, Stuxnet could be an equivalent of Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks in 1945. To successfully infiltrate a heavily guarded facilities in Natanz, the attackers had to solve a very difficult problem. How could a virus get into a place that had no direct connection to an internet? Let's first consider the background of the situation and try to understand why Iran's nuclear program was actually a problem for many Western countries. In 1953, after Atoms for Peace program was launched, the US grants Iran a technical training for nuclear power plant and a small reactor. The purpose was to develop Iran's energy program. Moreover, in 1970, Iran signs a non-proliferation treaty, which makes sure the Western partners that Iran's nuclear program was only for peaceful purposes. However, in 1979, an Islamic revolution happened in Iran. A new governor who came to power, Ayatollah Khamenei, was a strong opposer to a nuclear energy. Therefore, Iran's nuclear program was shut down. However, Iran comes into war with Iran from 1980 till 1988. A strong opposers made Iran to reassure its plans about the nuclear program, and Iran returns it. However, the purposes were not that peaceful anymore. Of course, it was not so pleasant for the Western partners. Therefore, in 1984, US adds Iran to the list of state sponsors of terrorism. In 2002, 5 months after 9/11, George Bush gives his famous State of the Union speech. He announces that Iran, Iraq, and North Korea are the axis of evil who are seeking to develop the weapons of mass destruction. Of course, Iran's nuclear program was not fitting into plans of Western countries. Moreover, a state of Israel was ready to go into war with Iran because of this. However, United States were on the side of the diplomatic solution of the problem. Meanwhile, a state of Israel started a clandestine campaign against Iran's nuclear program. Nuclear materials were sabotaged or destroyed. Scientists and engineers were bribed or targeted for assassination. The United States still joined Israel's campaign of sabotage. They started intercepting and rerouting vacuum pumps and power supplies to the United States facilities. There, they retooled everything with small but fatal flaws. Later on, the US Strategic Command and NSA offered an alternative to war and to diplomatic solution. They suggested using a delaying tactics to slow down the Iran's nuclear program. Their idea was to exploit a never-used cyber weapon that infects the Iranian networks and destroys the hardware by completely hijacking those computer networks. The code name of the operation was the Olympic Games. The operation purpose was to penetrate the heavily guarded nuclear facilities. Moreover, it was intended to deliberately destroy the enrichment centrifuges by the electronic sabotage. Stuxnet had to be undetectable and untraceable, and therefore to be never applied again. The target was Iranian nuclear power plant in Natanz that used Windows operation systems and Siemens software installed on it. Stuxnet was a piece of malware that targeted supervisory control and data acquisition systems in industrial controllers. The payload was all-in-one malware. Stuxnet was masked under legal programs. It used HTTP communication protocol. Stuxnet was updated via WinIP function and run in memory without creating any files. Obviously, Stuxnet had an uninstallment mechanism. Stuxnet used several zero-day vulnerabilities to infect the computers. However, there comes an interesting part. On Windows operation system, every piece of software has to be signed with a certificate that proves that the software is trustful and safe for the device. Stuxnet had a valid and legal certificate signed by Realtek, the largest manufacturer of computer equipment. Did the Realtek seriously sign a virus, or did Stuxnet creators steal the certificate? Of course, you can extract the signature from one program and insert it to another, but the signature won't be valid for a second program. In order to be valid, both programs should have the same cryptographic hash. However, there is a company that is called Sabotage that can steal certificates. The interesting part of it that both Sabotage and Realtek have offices at the same industrial park in Taiwan. Therefore, it is still an open question: how did Stuxnet get a valid certificate? Next interesting part is injection of malware into the Natanz nuclear power plants. Later on, it was discovered that there are 4 ways how could the malware be inserted in the Natanz closed networks. First, via the USB drive. Second, via network share. In case a computer shares a printer or even files with other devices, the virus can be spread. It is first being copied and then executed. Third option is through the remote procedure call vulnerability. And fourth, through recently patched MS-10-061. The Kaspersky lab has later discovered that about 16,000 users were infected with Stuxnet. The majority of them were in India, Iran, and Indonesia. In 2010, a version of Stuxnet began to replicate uncontrollably, infecting millions of computers. There has been several attempts to spread the Stuxnet among the zero patients. The Symantec antivirus company has determined that Stuxnet was delivered to Natanz power plant via the partner organizations. This could be tracked because Stuxnet keeps IP addresses and domains of all infected computers. Moreover, it stores the compilation date of the software. Let's look at the logs of the 0 patients infected. The first version of Stuxnet was compiled on 22nd of June of 2009. Few hours later, it was injected into the first victim. The name of the machine was Kaspersky, and the domain was called ISIE. It belonged to Fulat Technic Engineering Company. The enterprise was located in Iran. It developed an automated systems for Iranian industrial enterprises, mainly for steel and energy production companies. The company had plans and drawings of most of the industrial enterprises in Iran. The organization was infected twice. The second attack came about 1 year later in 2010. Such existence of the attackers can be interpreted that Fulat Technic Engineering & Co. was not only the shortest path to the Natanz, but also another target. The purpose of that was collection of data for the Iranian industry. The second, 0 patient, was also affected twice and even more intensively. The attack happened in March 2010. It led to the greatest spread of Stuxnet all over the world. As we can see on the log, the attacks happened in March and April 2010. The fact that the IP address in the log is different can indicate that the laptop was periodically connected to the enterprise network. The Behaju domain belongs to the Behaju Core Elec and Comp Engineering. This company is also located in Iran. It develops industrial automated systems. And obviously, the enterprise dealt with SCADA systems. The infection of the Behaju domain led to the infection of another enterprise with domain MSCCO. Most likely, the victim is called Mobarakeh Steel Company, Iranian's largest metallurgical complex. It is located also in Iran. Arrival of Stuxnet to this plant was connected to dozens of other attacks. It caused a chain reaction of rapid spread of Stuxnet. On July 7, 2009, a third 0 patient was infected. The victim was a computer named Apple Server with NEDA domain. It belonged to NEDA Industrial Group. A company was under United States sanction list. It was accused to illegally export banned substances to Iran, which could serve for military purpose. NEDA was attacked only once. Stuxnet did not manage to leave the organization. The fourth victim was infected at the same time with NEDA in 2009. Interestingly, here the infection started with the server, judging by the name in the logs. CGJ stands for Control Costa Jade Company. It is another Iranian company. It performs work in the field of industrial automation. The company focuses on design, procurement, and construction of control systems. Unlike NEDA Group, the organization was not in the sanctioned list. It was probably chosen as an initial victim because of the impressive portfolio of cooperation with largest Iranian enterprises in the field of energy and metallurgy. There was only one attack, and the Stuxnet barely left the organization. The fifth zero patient was attacked in 2010. Unlike many other victims, this one was attacked with 3 computers at once. At least 2 of them were servers. Kala Domain belongs to Kala Electric Company. Kala Electric is the main developer of IR-1 centrifuges for enrichment. The attack of this enterprise is logical. There are satellite images of Kala Electric where centrifuges have been developed and tested. After Stuxnet was injected to Natanz, what happened? How did espionage and sabotage was organized? First, Stuxnet would map the Natanz network and report the security details to the NSA. Later on, a new malware version would be created and injected into the enterprise. It would monitor day-to-day activities before finally going active. After activation, the malware would play back the normal sites of operations for human monitoring the control systems. However, the Stuxnet would begin its attack. Iranian engineers would have no ideas that centrifuges would tear themselves into pieces and everything caught on their way to shred. Undoubtedly, there were certain flaws in Stuxnet architecture which led to the uncontrollable replication of worm all over the world. It became a matter of time when Stuxnet would be discovered. In June 2010, a Belarusian company called Virus Lockheader discovered Stuxnet. It received a piece of malware that made computers on Iranian power plant reboot itself. The malicious software used several zero-day exploits for its attacks. Later on, another antivirus company called Symantec declared that the purpose of Stuxnet was not only espionage, but also a sabotage. They noticed that 60% of the infected computers were located in Iran. Experts traced the start of the spread to 5 organizations in Iran. During the same period of time, it was noticed that Iranian command and control service were disconnected from the infected computers. Some people say that this was an attempt to fix the virus from the Iranian side. Stuxnet was clearly carefully prepared. The attackers used MS Visual Studio 2008 to prepare the Stuxnet components. In September of 2010, Iranian officials have claimed that some computers of the employees at Natanz nuclear facilities were infected with the virus. The Institute of Science and International Security have later confirmed that Stuxnet was programmed to target the components configured the same way as the uranium centrifuges at Natanz. Stuxnet had enormous effect on the world. First of all, it slowed down the Iranian nuclear program. Second of all, it made many enterprises to reconsider and restructure their cybersecurity policies. Particularly, the response was awaited from Siemens and Microsoft. Microsoft has issued patches to deal with zero-day exploits. Siemens has also issued patches and made uninstallment tools to delete Stuxnet from its customer devices. Luckily, Stuxnet configuration blocks contain an 8-byte variable that has a number. It could be read as July 24 of 2012. In reality, that's the day when the subroutines of spreading Stuxnet by LNK files were stopped, and USB sticks were no longer infected with Stuxnet. A special variable is a so-called time of death of Stuxnet. Of course, the remaining questions is, was there other pieces of malware such as Stuxnet, or is it one-of-a-kind experiment? The future will give us an answer. If you are fond of this video, get a like under it, subscribe on my channel, and hit the bell button not to miss the new videos. Thank you. Goodbye.